Hi, I'm Paul Camillos from Shooting the Breeze podcast. Join the STB crew for conversations and stories around women's hoops and women in hoops, inspiring players, amazing coaches, and the legends behind the scenes. It's our 7th season. Drop us a like and review, and make sure to subscribe for early access and other bonus content.
I think that having another international competition on the calendar is always really exciting. Again, I think the fact that it is in Africa and that there's an opportunity for those developing countries to get a team in, get them international experience, even if they don't necessarily have the team to do 5-on-5, it's building all those countries into it as well, which then obviously makes our sport stronger and bigger.
Welcome to Shooting the Breeze. I'm Paul Camillos, and joining me on this podcast is Paralympian Hannah Dodd. Hannah is currently playing in Germany for the Rhine River Rhinos and has represented Australia, amongst other things, at the 2018 Worlds, 2021 Tokyo Paralympics, the 3x3 wheelchair at the Birmingham Comm Games, and has won 2 Women's National Wheelchair Basketball League Championships, 4 National Wheelchair Basketball League Championships, as well as the 2024 MVP and Final Series MVP. Welcome to the show, Hannah, and I have to say, that's a pretty jaw-dropping resume, and that doesn't even cover your equestrian career. You are a great representation of the dual-code para-athlete.
Yeah, I didn't intend to be a dual-code para-athlete. It was very much an accident of fate. But yeah, I've been very lucky to have the career I've had so far.
Awesome. So, I mean, first of all, Happy New Year. You know, you're currently playing in Germany, as we said, for the Rhine River Rhinos based in Wiesbaden. So, first up, how's the season going?
Pretty good so far. We start back playing the second half of the season this weekend. We're currently in 4th, so we're in playoffs position, which is where we wanted to be. The first half of the season was a little bit rocky with some injury and illnesses, so we're looking forward to having a bit of a stronger second part of the season.
So there's a couple of things that I'm really curious about out of this. First of all, how many teams are in the league?
So in the first Bundesliga here in Germany, there's 10 teams, but there are in Germany, I think 5 divisions.
Wow.
So they go from Bundesliga, second division, and then they go to like regional teams and further down. But yeah, in the top Bundesliga, there's 10 teams.
10 teams. So obviously there's an appetite for wheelchair basketball in Germany.
Yeah, I mean, Germany's obviously been one of the pioneers for wheelchair basketball for a very long time, and it's a very good league here. It's one of the few professional leagues, so it's always quality competition. Yeah, it's always really fun to play here.
Great. You know, because I don't know enough about, you know, wheelchair basketball in Germany, but I'm kind of curious, the name of the team, the Rhine River Rhinos, what are some of the other teams that are in the league? Yeah,
it depends on, some of them are just named after the city or the region that they're in, but quite a few have animals or things. So last year I was playing for the Zickau Beasts.
Right.
Our neighbouring Frankfurt team, who were in Div 1 last year, but they're in Div 2 this year, are the Skywheelers, things like that. Okay. So, yeah, it depends. A lot of the time it can be to do with sponsorship, but yeah, quite a few of us are named after animals for whatever reason.
And okay, so you said there's like a relegation promotion process for the leagues as well?
Yeah, so the bottom 2 teams are potentially relegated if the top 2 teams from Div 2 want to come up. So you can refuse promotion. Okay. So if you feel like you don't have the sponsorship or the capacity to play Div 1, you can choose to stay in Div 2, and then only one team gets relegated.
Okay.
So then only the 10th team gets relegated instead of the 9th and 10th.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it's great that there's so many teams that you can actually have that sort of depth in the competition.
Yeah.
And the opportunities it gives wheelchair athletes to be able to start, you know, at a lower division and work their way up to, first of all, whatever level they want to play to with the team. But also you've got the opportunity to be able to get up to that Premier League. And I suppose from there, there's a potential to represent Germany internationally?
Yeah, absolutely. And as it works, a lot of the larger clubs will have Div 2, Div 3 teams to develop their athletes through. And then there'll be some athletes that play in both. So there'll be a Div 2 athlete, but they'll play home games in the Div 1 or something like that, just to give them experience to get them coming through the levels. So it is pretty good like that, and gives them the pathways to be able to develop and get competition experience at that higher level without having to be thrown in the deep end.
Okay. And you just mentioned clubs have multiple teams. So quite a long time ago, we spoke to Vanessa Panousis about her time in Greece, and she was saying that the club that she played for had men's and women's and different divisions, but they also had other sports. Is that the same in Germany, that, you know, the club doesn't just represent basketball but also has other sports as well?
Again, it depends on the club.
Yep.
So, yeah, some clubs are multi-sport and then some are just wheelchair basketball. Don't quote me on this, but as far as I'm aware, none of the German teams do multiple sports.
Right.
But like Galatasaray in Turkey, it's obviously wheelchair basketball, but it's also a football club. It's also a normal able-bodied basketball club. Like, it's a massive organisation that runs all of it. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, in Germany, there isn't any that do that, but don't hold me to that.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We won't hold you to that. And I suppose people would be interested in hearing about is comparing the overseas leagues and also how these overseas leagues help you develop your game.
I think the biggest thing is I play all year round. So obviously, like, I play here sort of September to April. And then I come home and I play May to August in Australia and then come back. So I think just the fact that I'm playing constantly, like, it's not the opportunity we get in Australia because we do only have that league in winter. And then obviously, like, training camps in and around that, as well as, you know, local competitions that our states run. But I think just having that high level of competition the whole year round is amazing and definitely keeps you sharp and keeps you fit and keeps the brain ticking over the way it's supposed to. But I think also, particularly here in Europe, like, you're playing against international level players every week, like week in, week out. You're playing against Paralympians, you're playing against national team members, you're playing against the developing juniors who are the, you know, next gen athletes that are very, very talented. And then, you know, when you take that out of Germany and you start playing Euro Cups and things like that, then you're playing the best of the best for, you know, a couple of weekends a year as well. So I think the fact that it is just constant playing at a high level is the biggest thing for me. And it was definitely a big shock to the system coming from playing 4 months of a year to playing 12 months of the year. But it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it, and it's definitely helped my game.
I mean, it's not just about playing. There's also the opportunity, you know, learn about different cultures, different countries. How have you found that in your time playing overseas?
Yeah, look, it's definitely a culture shock the first time away. Our first season was in Italy, just outside of Venice. And yeah, getting used to, you know, the fact that the shops all closed for a couple of hours in the afternoon for siesta, and that they're randomly shut for Roman Catholic holidays that we didn't know about. And the fact that, you know, I think the weird one for me is that dogs are allowed everywhere. I mean, you know, restaurants, supermarkets, shops, airports, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I think just that, like, culture shock of getting used to working on someone else's, not only someone else's timelines, but, like, the different foods, the different customs, the different ways of getting around. For us, the different levels of accessibility can be interesting, particularly when you're in older parts of Europe. Yeah. Cobblestones are not my friend. Cobblestones in snow are definitely not my friend. Me and my partner Steve both gave some people a big fright last year going to Christmas markets in the snow and accidentally supermaning ourselves on cobblestones, which was not particularly enjoyable in sort of -5, -6, but all part of the experience.
All part of the experience. So before we get into more of the basketball stuff, what is the one big thing that you've found about Germany that surprised you, or, you know, you're kind of like, wow, really?
Oh, that's a good one. I think it's kind of weird because we do travel so much, with basketball, we're kind of used to just like slotting into different cultures all the time. I think the big one probably would be like, and this is going to sound really weird, but the amount of deli meats that there is, because there's just so many different types of like ham and salami and chicken mixed with all sorts of stuff. Whereas like for us, it's just straight, like there's no real, not inventiveness, but there's no real like deviation from just like your ham, your chicken, your turkey.
Yeah.
Here there's like mozzarella and prosciutto crudo and all these other things, and then they've got like cheese and paprika and all these weird stuff mixed into them as well, and it's just like pre-sliced deli meats. Like it's an entire like 2 aisles at my local supermarket. It is just deli meats, which was a weird thing for me to get used to. I think that was probably a really weird one. And the fact that, and it's a European thing, but the fact that alcohol is available in supermarkets, and there's again like 3-4 aisles of just booze. And it's so cheap. It's ridiculously cheap here compared to Australia.
Yeah, it would be, because obviously
it's a drinking culture here, particularly in Germany. With beer and Oktoberfest and everything. I think that was a really eye-opening one. And again, in Italy, because they love their wine. So like our local supermarket in Italy had literally an entire aisle of just wine, like of every type of wine under the sun.
I know. Look, we've been to Europe, kind of walk into a supermarket. And as a tourist, you don't normally walk into a supermarket, but we did for what I can't even remember what the reason was. And it was like, it was in France. And as you said, there's just aisles full of alcohol, and there's aisles full of stuff that you just don't normally expect to find in a supermarket.
Oh, and fireworks at New Year's time. That was a really weird one.
Really?
Yeah, so in Italy, there's like a whole aisle of fireworks that you can just buy. It's not quite as thing. I didn't see any in Germany, but you can buy them. So like when New Year's came, like everyone was just setting fireworks off in the street, and then like you're driving around like the next 2 days, and there's just like piles of fireworks like in random places in the road or next to the road or in like parks. So yeah, like that was definitely a weird one, particularly like for our first New Year's in Italy, where we went into our city square to watch the concert and fireworks, and then we pushed home, which is about 1 kilometre or so, and yeah, we were just like dodging fireworks left, right, and centre from people like just setting them off randomly in the street, which obviously in Australia that's not a thing. So yeah, that was probably the one thing that did surprise me the most, was how readily accessible fireworks are.
Okay, you're one of our most experienced squad members for the gliders, and you know you've done 115 games, and now also Wheelchair's got 3x3, and you got the silver medal at the Comm Games in Birmingham in 2022. First of all, how do you find the difference between the 3x3 and the 5-man game? And also, how do you see the opportunities that this presents for wheelchair basketball?
I think the biggest thing is like when we first started playing, we're like, 10-minute games, that'll be easy. And then you realize just how intense those 10 minutes are and how quick your brain has to like stay focused. And like in 5-on-5, obviously there's those flows and ebbs of the game. You get timeouts, you get stoppage and play and whatever, whereas with 3x3, that's not really the case. Like you get obviously like the 2 little timeouts, but you're kind of constantly going offense, defense, offense, defense, offense, defense.
Yeah.
Every, maximum 12 seconds. So I think the fact that you had to stay so switched on and so sharp for the whole game was a really big thing. As far as opportunities go, I think there's 2 sides to the coin for particularly the developing nations, or the nations that don't have enough participants to do 5-on-5. I think it's awesome that they'll get an opportunity to compete internationally.
Yep.
And get experience that will maybe then bring more people into their program so that they can develop their 5-on-5. But I think also for the countries that do have 5-on-5, it's a really good training tool, because in 5-on-5, you have your set roles, as a general overall, your lows will pick and screen, your mids will be your ball handlers, your highs will be your shooters. That's not everyone, but that's kind of the blanket rule of how 5-on-5 works for wheelchair basketball. Whereas with 3x3, you have to think independently because there's no coaching. You've got to make snap decisions, and I think it really develops people's thinking powers of how to make things work quickly and how to adjust on the fly. But it also means that everyone's got a ball handle, everyone's got to be able to pick, everyone's got to be able to shoot. So it develops the overall skill of players as well, which I think is really good as a development tool as well for the 5-on-5 game. Because then when you get into the 5-on-5 game, you got an extra, double the shot clock to think things through. But I think it gives people more confidence because they do have that extra time, and then they've also got that extra skill level of playing the 3x3. And I think it transfers over really well to the 5-on-5 game.
From your experience, do you think that having done the 3-man game, how it's translated to the 5-man game, you've got more opportunities to slot into different positions?
Absolutely. And it does give you that little bit of flexibility in who can play what. And it then means like you can change some structures of lineups. You can change some like set plays out of a traditional 5-on-5 setting and put people in roles that you might not expect them to be in. Yep. Which then obviously changes how the defense plays defense and how we play offense. But I think also it just makes you so much more decisive in what you're doing, because you don't have time to make a mistake, sort of thing. Because if you do, you've wasted 3 seconds and then you've got 6 seconds left, sort of thing. So I think that decisiveness and that real precision to get the skill done well the first time transfers over really well to the 5-on-5 game, because then you get that sort of transition basketball, which in wheelchair basketball is really hard to defend because we have no lateral movement. So if you can get a quick changeover and you get out fast, then you're looking at layups nearly every time. So I think, that precision and that decisiveness to do things well and do them quickly, but not stressfully, it translates really well to the 5-on-5 game.
Talk us through that silver medal comms game at Birmingham. How did you feel when, you were going through that game and it looked like when you were getting to the point where you knew that it was going to be your game?
I think for us, like, it was such an interesting experience because 3x3 for wheelchair was so new still at that stage. So when we started the process for Comm Games, like, the rules were still being established and still being changed, and they were still trying to figure out how to apply the FIBA rules to wheelchair basketball. So that first sort of like 4 or 5 months of the process was A, us learning the game, but B, also adjusting to all the rule changes that were coming down. So that was pretty fun. I think Comm Games was interesting because, particularly with England and Scotland, we're used to playing them as a GB unit. So seeing them split up was a bit different. But I think we got off to a really good start in the semi-final against England. And then they sort of started clawing back a bit and we got a bit anxious about it. And, we had to really lock down on the defense and make it as hard as physically possible for them to kind of get anywhere. And again, it was that thing that some of the teams hadn't adapted to everyone playing every role, which then meant that you could target their ball handler, you could target their big, because they were still playing their traditional role rather than playing an individual role. And I think that's where we succeeded, because all 4 of us could do a bit of everything and it was fine. And I think that's what made going up against Canada so hard, because they were in a similar position. And obviously, Katie's a phenomenal player and a phenomenal shooter. So trying to get the ball out of her hands was difficult to start. And it is in the 5-on-5 game as well. She's an absolute pest. But she's got the same thing. She's got phenomenal lows and mids who can do a bit of both, who can finish, who can ball handle. So much like us, it was really hard to get good defense, because if you wanted to lock down one, you had to give up something else, and vice versa. So I was kind of playing the percentages and hoping that they came in our direction.
And, we had the able-bodied Gangurrus there as well, who pulled in a bronze. Did you guys get to sort of cross paths much at all?
Yeah, we did, which was really cool. For us, it was kind of funny because Priyanka, who predominantly works in the wheelchair basketball for Basketball Australia, is actually the manager of the Gangurrus. So we actually got to spend a lot of time, and obviously, like, we were training at similar times. We were on the bus a lot together. We were housed together. So it was really good to actually interact with them, and they came to watch us, we came to watch them. So it was cool to have both us as Wombats and them as Gangurrus being able to interact and get to know each other. And obviously, like, for them, they'd never seen wheelchair basketball at a high level before, so it was a pretty cool learning experience for them. And obviously it was good to get to know them on a personal level as well.
Oh, look, it sounds like it was a real experience where, let's face it, it was still the early days of the 3-on-3 game. You guys were kind of like getting together and helping each other out. And you kind of, I suppose both teams were feeling out their own way through this whole 3-on-3 game.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, it was the first time that able-bodied had played alongside wheelchair basketball at like a major event, and we'd been integrated fully into it, which was a really cool experience. And kind of one of the awesome things about the Comm Games is that the para and the able-bodied runs concurrently. So I think that was really fun. And yeah, I think it was a first sort of thing for both of us, with 3x3 being so new. So it was kind of a first Comm Games for all of us, I think. So I think that was probably part of it too, as we were all making our debut at the same time.
And it's going to come back for Glasgow in 26. What's the prep looking like for these games?
Yeah, it's going to be a bit of a weird one for us, because it's going to be running at the same time as our World Championships. So like, I think our Worlds are like the month beforehand, and particularly on the women's side, we have a limited number of players. We're not a massive squad, so whoever's going to Worlds is most likely going to Comm Games at the same time. So it'll be a pretty quick turnaround between the two competitions. But I think, yeah, like, we're not really, as weird as it is, we're not really looking at it as a solo thing. Like, it'll be part of our prep. Like, we scrimmage 3-on-3 games at camps and things like that. So again, we get different combinations of players together, but you get to put people in those slightly uncomfortable positions in a training camp, so they can get used to, being a ball handler, being a shooter, being whatever we need them to be, without the pressure of it actually being a game. I think it will still be used as a development tool for us. And then whoever's sort of feeling the most comfortable and the most confident in that sphere will then go through the Comm Games, I think, is how it'll look. I can't say for sure because I don't know. But
And you've mentioned the World, and this is the first, it's coming up, is the first 3-on-3 World Champs being played in South Africa. So for you, what are your thoughts about this? Obviously, it's a positive step forward for wheelchair basketball, but from an athlete's perspective, what are your thoughts about the whole thing?
Again, I think it's such an exciting opportunity for us, because like, outside of our zone qualifiers, Worlds and Paralympics, like, we don't get a lot of opportunities to play internationally. Like, that's for competition, that's not for friendlies or development and things like that. So I think that having another international competition on the calendar is always really exciting. Again, I think the fact that it is in Africa and that there's an opportunity for those developing countries to get a team in, get them international experience, even if they don't necessarily have the team to do 5-on-5, it's building all those countries into it as well, which then obviously makes our sport stronger and bigger and more competitive. So I think it'll be really fun. I think it'll be really interesting to see who each country sends, because obviously, like, in those top teams around the world, they've got multiple lineups that they can send in a 3-on-3 format. So I think it'll be really interesting to see who ends up being named for each team as well.
And you mentioned this, and I really hadn't thought about it. It's the opportunity for African nations to be able to field teams in this, because, we've had Coach Liz Mills on the show a few times, and one of the things she always keeps saying is that there is an astounding amount of talent in Africa that has just, we know nothing about it and we never see it. And I suppose, the same would have to be the case for wheelchair basketball.
It definitely is, but there's also the extra added barrier of the fact that the healthcare system isn't as good as it is in developed countries. The access to equipment isn't as good as what it is in developed countries. So like, for Comm Games, Ella Sabblejack actually donated her chair to one of the South African girls straight after the games, and they took it home with them, because their one-pointer was literally, every time she got hit, was falling out of her chair, because her chair was just a basic club chair that didn't fit her and didn't work for her body and her disability. Again, when we get these opportunities and they get to participate and they get to compete, then they get recognition and they get more funding, and then they can develop to get better equipment, better training, better healthcare for themselves. So it's more than just sport. It's that flow-on effect that goes back as well to bring them up in the same thing. But yeah, there's absolutely, like, if you watch the Africa Zone qualified, like, you can see the talent there, even though, they're not as high executing and high performing, but you can see the athleticism is absolutely present in them. It's just the training and the high performance isn't as high as what it is in the countries that have been playing wheelchair basketball for the last 3 decades.
Yeah. So it's the talent is there. They just need that development to be able to get themselves up to that level.
Absolutely.
And like Coach Liz says, don't sleep on Africa because they're going to show up and play one day.
That's it. And like we're seeing it even in the Asia Oceania zone for us in the past, I think, I'm going to get this wrong, but like 4 or 5 years, we've gone from having 3 women's team, which was us, Japan and China, qualifying every year to now having Thailand's coming through, India's coming through, Iran is coming through. Like we've got, at least now every zonal, we've got 6 to 7 teams that are playing on the women's side of things that are developing, and they're coming on really strong. Like Thailand the last couple of years has come out of pretty much nowhere to be a real contending team, and Iran as well. And, India, and last AOZ, they had a mixed AOZ team for girls who didn't have a country team to play for. But they all got together and they had 3-4 days to train together, and they ended up finishing, I think, 5th.
Wow.
So I think that as well, like it's not just the Africa zone, it's our zone as well, being able to develop. And even some of the lesser countries in Europe coming through the 3x3 system with like Bosnia and Herzegovina and Switzerland and a few of those other ones that don't have 5-on-5 teams but are slowly developing their 3x3 teams and building their programs through the 3x3.
And you mentioned a country. I mean, we saw Thailand during the games that were televised or came through on YouTube here that were held there. But you mentioned a country that a lot of people, when you talk about this country in basketball, they all go, really? And that's India.
Yeah.
Because like the reality is, with the population they have, just the simple math says there's got to be a lot of good basketball players there.
I think it's very similar to Africa, where they've got the athleticism, they've got the talent, they just don't have the structures to be successful yet. But definitely, like, I think the first time I saw them was 2019, qualifying for Tokyo, and then seeing them again in Thailand last year. Like, there was obviously a massive step forward for them. So, yeah, like, again, it's very similar that they just need the investment into coaching, into high-performance structures, into equipment, and they'll definitely be a contender for the future, no doubt about it.
Wow. There's more competition coming for the gliders,
obviously,
But look, it's a good thing for the sport, right?
Absolutely.
The more teams that are there, the closer the competition, the tougher the competition, the more eyeballs that are going to go to watch the game, just on the basis that there's a lot of good action. Let's watch the game. Yeah. Unless you've seen a game, you just don't understand, the physical. I've talked about this before, but the physicality is just astounding.
Yeah, it's always fun when you're like, officially it's a non-contact sport, but it's more there's rules around the contact. Not a wheelchair rugby free-for-all, but it's definitely not non-contact.
No, I could definitely attest to that. Let's talk about Paris for a minute, because, that was tough. The gliders just didn't qualify, and it came down to the repechage game against Japan. Now, we've had Coach Craig Campbell and Shelley Matheson who talked about this on a previous podcast episode that we've done. For you, how'd you find that one?
For one, it was really difficult for me because I hadn't been in any of the preparation, because I'd obviously been in Germany. So I flew directly from Germany to Japan and then Japan home. So I think that was really hard for me because I didn't know what the team looked like before I got to Japan.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, losing some of our major players from Worlds definitely hurt us, and trying to fill the gaps that left in our team was a really big thing to do, and we obviously didn't do it to the level that we needed to do it to. I think for me personally, like, Paris was going to be my last Paralympics, so that definitely hurt a little bit more, knowing that I wouldn't be going back to the Paralympics again. So I definitely took a few long weeks when I got home, and sort of shoved basketball to the side and went, no, I'm just going to be a person and feel what I'm feeling and deal with it a bit later when I'm a little less volatile in how I feel.
Yeah.
And it was definitely hard to get back into training when, like, National League came around, and I went, I actually, I got to start putting the effort back in, because I am most definitely not a naturally talented athlete. I don't have any natural skill to fall back on, unfortunately. So I think it was definitely a very big mental and emotional struggle. And I think particularly coming back into like the Ford bowling series in July, having to play Japan again, there was sort of a bit of a sense of dread, but also just like, I think, revenge. Like you
Yeah.
really just wanted to beat them into the ground. And unfortunately, like they are a really good team. They've been together for a very, very long time. And for us, like we just didn't have the repetitions together because unfortunately, the reality of Australia is we live a long way away from each other. We don't get a lot of time together, even in a good year. So I think that was definitely a hard thing. And I think, having Bridie and Gouch coming back definitely helped us. But it was just, not enough to fill the gap, unfortunately. As horrible as it was to experience, I think it's actually been really good, and it's lit a fire under a lot of the younger girls particularly. And, that everyone doesn't want to be in that situation again come, I think it's November now, for the next AOCs to qualify for Worlds next year. As much as it was a horrible thing to go through and to experience, particularly for some of the girls who were in the 2016 team that failed to qualify for Rio, I think it definitely brought up some very raw wounds for them. But I think it overall has been a good thing. It helped us reassess what actually needed to change in our program to make us successful. As hard as it was, there was a lot of very brutal and honest feedback and conversations that needed to be had. And I think we're in a bit of better place for it now.
It's almost like Japan's become a bit of a boogeyman for the gliders, just based off what's happened over the last, couple of years. Do you find yourself, like when you get opportunities to watch Japan play, you're not just watching, but you're slicing and dicing and analysing what they're doing, to try and see, hey, what is there that we could do, or is there an opportunity that we missed before?
Obviously, like we do that with every game, and we're really lucky to have Warren Brown, who is our video guy, and he is an absolute magician on the computers. Pretty much anytime we play or scrimmage, he films it and it's up and spliced and coded before we even get back to the hotel most of the time.
Okay.
So we are really lucky in the fact that we do have that, and we have, makes, misses, turnovers, whatever it is. So we can really go back and break it down and see what was effective for us, what was effective for them, and make those adjustments. I think the hard thing is like we do play Japan so regularly that we do know them inside and out, and we know that we are very capable of beating them. We just haven't executed it well enough in the last couple of matchups. So I think that's probably the more frustrating thing, and how it feels a bit bogeyman is that we know we're more than capable of taking them if we play how we are capable of playing.
I mean, you know it's going to happen, right? You know that dub's coming, right? But
For sure.
It's just that frustrating, we want it to happen this time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's that thing of like, obviously in Ford and at not Rapid Charge, but at AOC, like we were so close to them. We were, I think, max 10 points behind most of the time, which is a very doable game. That's 5 baskets. It's absolutely nothing at the end of the day. Yeah, the fact that we know it is very doable for us, and we get to play them in about a month's time in Osaka, which again, it's always hard playing Japan in Japan. But I think that'll be a really good testing ground to see what we've learnt in the last 12 months or so, or 8 months since Ford. But yeah, I think it is one of those things that we know we're very capable of doing it. We just need to execute properly on the time.
Yeah. Like I said, it's going to happen. It's just this time, is it the next time? We know it's going to happen. We mentioned up at the beginning of the top of the show that you started your parasports career in equestrian.
Yes.
Right? And obviously an absolute overachiever. You also got 4 national championships there as well. And you made the London Paralympics. I'm really curious why you decided, I'm going to put the horse to one side and I'm going to go play wheelchair basketball.
It wasn't really a decision to start with, to be honest. So I did dual sport for about 3 years.
Yeah.
So I played basketball and rode from 2013 through to the beginning of 2017. So I was still doing both at like a national and international level, which made for a very hectic looking year, particularly through that middle section, June to August, because it's where obviously National League runs, but it's also where a lot of the major comps for horse riding is as well. So those weekends were very busy and had to be planned well in advance. So, yeah, there were occasions where I looked at my calendar and just went, what am I doing? But to be honest, the major contributing factor to me going out of horses was just cost. When I started para-equestrian, it was a borrowed horse event. So whenever you did international competition, you literally arrived, picked a horse out of a hat, got 4 or 5 days to learn, and then you went and competed. And then pretty much as soon as I started international, those rules changed, and it went to you competed on your own horse at Paralympics and Worlds instead. And then it changed again that you had to qualify on your own horse. So then it had to be the pair that qualified, and it just became a fact that I don't come from a wealthy family and I couldn't afford a $100,000 horse sort of thing. I was very lucky for London. I had a family who I'd been riding for a couple of years come on board, and they bought me Kiwi that I took to London, and they loaned her to me for 12 months to be able to qualify and compete. And then the owner took her back over and competed her herself. The main thing was just I couldn't afford to do my own horse competition sort of thing was the big one. And then obviously in 2017, I moved states from Sydney to the Sunshine Coast, and just being away from home and not having mum to help me with the basic day-to-day of feeding, rugging, help me tack up and untack, just meant it wasn't a feasible thing to do. So yeah, that was the main reason that I switched to just purely wheelchair basketball. Horse riding was a bit too hard on the bank balance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a great way to get through money.
Yeah, it very much is. One of those things, like obviously the cost of a basketball wheelchair and things like that, like the initial cost is pretty expensive, and replacement parts are also pretty expensive, but it's not the ongoing feeding and farrier and competition entries and things like that hit me quite as hard.
Oh, yeah. It's a never-ending stream of money that needs to go into any sport with a horse. Let's be honest.
That's it.
Okay. And related to this, what was it that inspired you to get into para-athletics at the level that you've achieved?
For me, it was Sydney Paralympics for a few reasons. The first one, obviously, like that was my first exposure to parasport at all.
Yep.
And really disability, like outside of a hospital setting. So that was like a big thing, and it was a massive eye-opening. We did the school tours to all the main events, but I was actually really lucky to meet Julie Higgins about 3 months before the games and go out to her property out in Windsor in Sydney and meet her and her horse and get to know her, and then watch her win her double gold in Sydney at Horsley Park. And I think I was 8 at the time. And I kind of remember like driving back out, being in the car with mum and just being like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like, I'm going to go to the Paralympics. And, being 8, my mum was like, sure, sounds great. You do you sort of thing. Yeah. And that kind of what started it. And then, got classified at 12, which is the minimal age for para-equestrian, and worked my way from there. And then, went to nationals the following year at 13, which actually ended up being what we call a CPEDI, which is an international event. So it was us, Canada, and New Zealand. And I ended up finishing in the top 3, which was pretty amazing, and got invited to the national squads, and then got to go to Hartbury and Millfield in the UK and do some CDIs there the following year, just after my 14th birthday, which was pretty crazy. And that was kind of the first sort of taste of international competition, and where I was like, I actually really enjoy doing this. So that was kind of where it kicked off and went, this is a doable thing for me, and I want to do it. And then just spent the next couple of years working through, and missed out on 2008 because of equine flu. The last qualifier in Australia was cancelled, and that was the only one I was eligible to compete in because it was the year of my 16th birthday. So you have to be in the year of your 16th birthday to compete, to qualify for a Paralympics. And there was supposed to be an event in January, and then it got cancelled because of equine flu came through and wiped out our entire equestrian industry for a while. I was longlisted for 2010 Worlds and ended up finishing, I think, 7th. So in the ranking, so just outside of the team and reserves. And then obviously made it through to London, which was amazing and an absolute crazy journey, to be honest, because I only got Kiwi, I think, like 6 to 8 weeks before the first qualifier. So,
Wow.
like, trying to build that relationship as quickly as possible was definitely a challenge and a bit of a wild ride. And yeah, like from start to finish, it was less than 12 months. So that was definitely a bit insane. And then obviously, like, I started doing the dual sport thing and ended up being longlisted for both World Championships that year in 2014 for basketball and equestrian. Equestrian, I was fifth, so just outside the team. I was a non-travelling reserve. And then, yeah, for basketball, I was definitely not at the level that I should have been going to a World Championships, but was a reserve mid-pointer in case something happened with injury and illness and all that sort of thing.
And you must get asked this question a lot, but I still do want to ask it. When you started off your para-athletics career, did you think you'd be at the position you are now with having achieved all the things that you've achieved so far in your career?
Definitely not wheelchair basketball. Basketball was never on the agenda. No other sport was ever on the agenda until it came around. Yeah, like obviously, like I always wanted to be a Paralympian and I had my heart set on that. And when you're, a teenager and you're 12, 13, you can be pretty stubborn about what you want out of life. So I definitely knew that I was going to make that regardless. I think even at London, if someone had said that my next Paralympics would be in an entirely different sport, I probably would have laughed in their face and told them they're dreaming, sort of thing. Like, no, because as I said, I'm not a naturally athletic person. Those genes definitely went to my two older brothers. They are very natural sportsmen and I am not, but I am stubborn and I am competitive.
Hey, stubborn and competitive, that works. Talking about your disability for a minute. In wheelchair basketball, we've talked about this with many people in the past, there's a difference in points and you can get reclassified. How's the reclassification of your disability impacted your decision on playing and your decisions about playing and the choices you make?
Yeah, so I am what we casually call medically complex. So I have 3 different conditions. So I was born with 2, which is sacroiligenesis, which means I'm missing the bottom 9 vertebrae in my spine. So I have no sacrum and no coccyx bones, but I do have a full spinal cord. But obviously, because it wasn't protected, it's quite damaged. And then I also have spina bifida very, very mildly, which for me is just a widening in my central canal up in my thoracic vertebrae. So it doesn't really impact me too much, but it just is there. And then when I was 15, nearly 16, I developed progressive peripheral neuropathy, which I equate to working with one bar of cell reception. So sometimes the messages come through perfectly clear and then other times there's nothing. So it's a very wildly fluctuating disability from day to day, and sometimes even during the day it can be a very crazy sort of thing. So for me it started as just writer's cramps in my hands, which being, year 11 and doing speed essays and things like that, having had a very fun side effect of my sacroiligenesis, which is subluxation in my joints. So all of my moving joints dislocate.
Wow.
Yeah. So because obviously with my fingers and hands and things like that, I have quite a bit of arthritis, and I have for a while now because they pop in and out quite a lot. So I've done a fair amount of damage to my bones. We just thought it was, arthritis playing up and that sort of thing. And then it started happening in the hand that I don't write with. And then we were like, oh, there actually might be something quite wrong. And as it turned out, it's actually inherited off my dad's side of the family. My dad has it as well, and a couple of his siblings, but they all got it in their 50s and 60s, and I got it at 15. Oh. And the working theory is that because my central nervous system was already damaged, it just kicked off the peripheral nervous system problems earlier. But because it is progressive, it does mean that my function has gone down. So when I started playing wheelchair basketball, I was a 2.5 and I sat up quite tall, and I was still walking majority of the time. Like I did have a chair, but I really only used it for like going out or going shopping and things like that, where I knew I was going to be on my feet for a long time. And then obviously as the neuropathy's gone worse in my legs, I've moved to being a full-time wheelchair user pretty much. I can still stand and walk a little bit, but it's not ideal and I tend not to do it. But again, there are days with my neuropathy where I'm fully paralysed from my chest down. So just again, with that wild fluctuation. So I'm now a incomplete C5, C6 quadriplegic. So basically from the base of my throat down, any nerve branches that come off my spinal cord are affected. So basically anything that involves moving limbs is impaired. So I got reclassified the first time at under 25 Worlds in 2015, and they moved me down to a 2-pointer. And then when I lost more hip function and more abdominal function, which meant that obviously I was quite unstable sitting, I got reclassified again in 2017 in the UK, and they actually dropped me a full point to a 1-pointer, and I've been a 1-pointer ever since.
Wow.
So obviously, like, it changed my role. Traditionally, like, your mids are your ball handlers and secondary shooters, and then I went to a 1. That's, you pick a sealer sort of role, and then I kind of moved back into a pseudo mid role of being a point guard and a ball handler again for Tokyo, because we had so many ones. Like, half our squad was 1-pointers. So yeah, it's been an odd evolution of roles and classifications.
See, listening to that, it tells me a few things. Obviously, yes, you are competitive and you're resilient and you are willing to push yourself to be able to continue. For anybody listening who's kind of hearing this and kind of going, I've got my own issues. What would you be saying to people who are finding themselves in tough situations? Because, you've been through those tough situations. You're still out there playing. You're still competing at incredibly high level. What would you say to them?
I think the biggest thing is not to compare yourself to another person, because what is, a 10 out of 10 bad day for me might be a 1 out of 10 bad day for you, and vice versa. So everyone reacts to situations and stresses and shit happening differently. So I think that's the biggest thing, is like going, oh, well, it doesn't bother them that this happened, but it really bothers me. And I think that's where a lot of the like turmoil comes from, because people go, oh, but they're handling it so well and I'm not. And I think that's the biggest thing, is like, just don't worry about other people and comparing yourself to other people, like in levels of, oh, well, they've got it worse off, so I can't feel bad about what I'm going through and that sort of thing. Like, if it's a 10 out of 10 bad day, it's a 10 out of 10 bad day. Like, it doesn't matter what the situation is. It could be as simple as you stubbed your toe and your leg hurts. Like, if you're just in that mental space where it just feels horrible, like, nothing is going to change that fact that it's a 10 out of 10 bad day. So I think that's the biggest thing of going, like, your own personal scale of what is good and what is bad is really, really important. And it's really important to be self-aware of where you are on that scale so that you can adjust. Like, for me, I have to adjust my expectations of what my body's going to do every day. I could be like, I'm going to do a deep clean, and then I wake up and I don't have any function. I'm like, well, I'm not doing a deep clean today. So I think being able to adjust and be flexible with yourself is really, really important for being able to face those hard days or those challenges, and not hold yourself to a standard that is someone else's standard. Set your own standard, be happy with it, and just be comfortable with things not going right, because things don't go right. Like, it's life. Things go wrong every single day. So I think that's the really important thing, is don't compare yourself to each other. Be comfortable in where you are day to day, and just accept the fact that sometimes shit really does hit the fan, and there's nothing you can do to change that fact other than accept it and try and move on.
That is such an important message for people who are listening to it, because, as you said, what's good for you on any given day may not necessarily be good for someone else. I suppose people do kind of lose sight of that sometimes.
Yeah, and I think it's like that saying of like, kids are starving in Africa, and you're like, well, yeah, but that's not applicable to my situation right now. So it's that thing of, yes, someone might be having a worse day or a better day, but it doesn't impact how I'm feeling and what's going on with me. And I think, like, particularly in a team sport, I've found that that's a really fun dynamic to manage, particularly in those longer tournaments when, people are getting tired, they're getting sore, they're getting crabby, and trying to keep everyone on that level playing field where we can perform and manage ourselves is really important. To not compare yourself to other people and how they're feeling how you're feeling, as convoluted as that logic is. But
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Look, finally, I suppose the big question is, what's next for Hannah?
what's next? Currently and immediately is Euro Cup qualifiers in 3 weeks in France.
Yep.
So that's our next big thing, obviously outside of the regular Bundesliga season. From there, I pretty much go directly to Osaka Cup to play with the Gliders. And then obviously finishing out the Bundesliga here, we're looking to be in the playoffs and to be in Euro Cup finals. And then obviously coming back to Australia, playing National League and preparing for AOZ and World Championship qualifiers at the end of the year in Thailand is the sort of immediate goals. Next year, it's Worlds and Comm Games.
Yep.
And then after that, I'm actually looking at retirement. So that's going to be most likely my last international comps will be Comm Games and Worlds, and go and be a normal human for the first time in two decades, which will be an interesting adventure to not be an elite athlete for the first time since I was 12.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been a while. So as much as I'm still enjoying playing basketball, I think it's time for me to have a bit of a normal life, whether that's a full-time break or whether I get bored and come back in a few years. I don't know yet. But the current plan is to go be a normal human being in 18 months or so.
Well, it's interesting you say, maybe I'll get bored and come back, because that's one of the things that you see in wheelchair is people do stop and then come back or have much longer careers. So it's interesting that you're kind of going, yeah, but I might just leave the door open just a little bit.
Yeah, as I said, it's been 2 decades of my life, and I am looking forward to doing sport around life rather than life around sport. Maybe putting my uni degrees to good use for a few years at least. And obviously, not falling off the face of the earth. I still want to be involved. I'll still be playing national leagues and potentially, hopefully, maybe coaching. In some form is something that does interest me. So we'll see where that ends up.
Okay, you've just kind of got me curious about this. What are the uni degrees?
So I have a degree from Western Sydney in sport and exercise science.
Yep.
And a degree from Uni SC in prosthetics and orthotics.
Wow. All right. Cool. I'm impressed.
Yeah. I grew up wearing orthotics, obviously, and AFOs and leg braces. So I've always been interested in that. And that was always the plan, was to do P&O. And then, unfortunately, when I finished school, the only P&O program was in Melbourne at La Trobe.
Oh.
And because of my age, I was 17 when I finished school and was about to age out of the kids' hospital and paediatric care. So I decided to hang around in Sydney and establish my adult care first and make sure I had everything set up. So I did the sport and exercise degree as a bit of a filler degree, but it's actually served me pretty well as an athlete, and I'm quite happy that I did do it. University of Sunshine Coast started their prosthetics and orthotics program pretty much right as I was about to apply to La Trobe to do postgrad. And they had the SEEDS program and the Parasport program being run under Bridie Keane and Brendan Burkett. And the weather's a bit nicer on the Sunshine Coast in Melbourne. I'm not a fan of the cold, as funny as that is, living in sub-zero now. So I decided to go to Sunny Coast instead and do it up there. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see that.
Yeah. Worked in my favour. I ended up with my partner as well, so can't complain.
Awesome. Hannah, thanks so much for joining us on Shooting the Breeze. It's been great talking to you. It's been fantastic finding about all these things that you've been doing, that you've done, what's happening for you in Germany at the moment, the opportunities in terms of Euro Cup and international competition. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you get our latest pod, and we really appreciate if we could get a like and a review so we can extend the reach to more listeners. And don't forget, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and LinkedIn.